The magician, I kind of did my own interpretation of it because I'm me. And but you know, there's always in the magician there's usually a representation of the four elements. You know, earth, air, fire, and water, and so all of those are incorporated in there. And of course, there's always a sword because it's a magical implement used in spell casting, and the Ouroboros, which is the snake swallowing its tail in an infinity symbol floating above his head. And so it's more of an icon, yeah, rather than a narrative. So it's a different angle for me. I've mostly been a narrative painter, and so this series is going more into symbolism, iconic symbolism. So it's a fun new avenue.
Max?
My question is primarily for Brendan. By the way, that sculpture is beautiful. Is that Ennis the model?
Yes.
Because I painted him a few times.
Oh, wonderful. He's amazing.
Well, my question is this. I'm a lot older than you guys, and in trying to go to colleges and art schools, they didn't give me the training to learn the skill to be able to work realistically. This exhibition here is supposed to be about realistic painting. And I find that it was difficult to find places where I could develop that skill to work realistically and also to observe reality more sensitively. So my question is, where do you find that?
So I had, going back to my history of coming to sort of studying academically, I became, let me think back for a second, just organize things in my head for a second. So in college, I was very interested in art history. And during the summers, I would try out art classes at different New York art schools here and there, and I was kind of let down. I didn't, and maybe it was just bad luck of the teacher who was there, but I didn't see it as an avenue to getting to some of the serious artists that I admired historically. And so I would drop out of the class, or just not continue it, and then I just had the good luck when I graduated from college that my father knew Judy Kudlow, who worked with Andrea Smith, and they were teaching a Florence Academy drawing method. So that was just pure good luck that I ended up at a Florence Academy drawing program. And then, you know, once I started working, everyone's talking about what other people are doing in New York, and Colleen Berry was studying there at the same time, and they discussed closing the school because Andrea was thinking about moving back to Australia. And so I went to GCA, and I remember I walked into GCA, and there was a life-size plaster of a Michelangelo, and there was a life-size plaster of a Greek, and there was St. Jerome, and everyone was sitting there diligently working away, and I just thought, this will get me to where I want to go. I mean, there's just no question, it's right there, I can see it. And that's not anything negative to what some of the other teachers were doing in other places. I knew that those routes weren't, their work didn't look as though it would facilitate me with what I needed. And then after spending time at GCA, I really knew what to look for. So when I decided to stone carve, I did a bunch of research, and I was like, I only have one chance of doing this because it's going to be expensive. And so I just emailed around until I found the person, and I recognized, you know what you're talking about. Steve Shaheen, who taught me how to stone carve, he went to Siena, and he learned how to stone carve with old Italian, there's an Italian word that escapes me, but essentially they would do stone carvings for churches and things, but they were well adversed in that long history of stone carving that Italy has. So it was in the beginning a little luck, and then by the end it was, I'd been educated in what to look for.
Let me just follow up with one other question. When it comes to doing the skill, do you differentiate between what might be a formula and rendering that form, or would it be more based on the particulars that you see in reality in the form?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we learn how to draw the anatomy of something, but then when we look at a person posing, it's different lighting, different nose, etc., etc. Is there a sensitivity that you develop to be able to do that? And I'm asking you because in your sculpture you seem to have that.
So what you're describing is in some ways the history of figurative art. You know, each culture decides a little bit, and now in contemporary culture, I think anyone can choose anything, but you know, you look back at the Greeks and the Romans and things are a little idealized, and then suddenly you have Caravaggio and things are a little more particular, and then it gets back to neoclassicism, they get a little more stylized, and then, you know, so you learn both. I had the great fortune of learning both. I drew and painted some very stylized plaster sculptures, and then we would go into the figure room, and Jacob would tell me, no, you got to get some of these little good little dots and dimples and everything else, and so it's both. And then it's like a skill set. The academic training is wonderful because it's like learning how to play the masterpieces. You don't have to do it for the rest of your life, but at least you have that training. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, one more if you don't mind. I've heard the word creativity used a lot. And I used to joke in the past that sometimes creativity means bad drawing. How do you feel about that?
Creativity being bad drawing? I don't know that I could weigh in on that unless I knew more particularly what the person is talking about. I mean, I don't know what I mean, I have ideas about what makes a good drawing and a bad drawing, but I would need more specifics in order to weigh in.
Well,
Particular artist.
all right. Well, there are many artists who draw, paint, but they don't observe the form that well. And if you say they've made a mistake or whatever, it doesn't look right, they say, well, we're being creative. Now, some people might even use Picasso as an example.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, that's a tough question. I think, again, it would come down to specifics. Like, so maybe, you know, someone like Lucian Freud, you know, there's lots of errors and mistakes, and intentional or not, I'm not sure, probably both. And his form is strange, but the paintings have vigor and power. I mean, I think that enters into a realm of more subjectivity, and there's a lot of bad, messy painting, but then there's some really good, messy painting. So, again, I'd have to, that's a case by case.
Yes.
Can I briefly piggyback on that?
Yeah, and then
Wanna
we're
end
gonna
it?
wrap up, yeah.
Oh, well, I don't want to have the last word.
No, thank you.
That's work, for sure.
So, I mean, I think what you're speaking to, I had a similar experience in Georgia. You know, when I went to college and undergrad, and I really realized that I was very interested in classical training. And I had one professor, well, I had two great professors, Joseph Norman and Margaret Morrison, who were like getting me started in solid foundations. And I just became obsessed with learning how to draw and paint from life, illusionistically and realistically, and being able to convey what I'm seeing accurately. And all of the other professors at that time at the University of Georgia were trying to stop me. They were telling me that this is I'm going in the wrong direction, this is regressive culturally, that creativity comes from breaking the constructs of the academic tradition, And I said, but I've grown up with seeing abstraction and all of these things, and it's fine. And I've already done that. Like, I was a child doing abstract expressionist paintings. Like, and I'm not gonna say that I dislike all of that genre of work, but it wasn't something I was interested in. But there was a culture resisting, pressuring me not to get an academic training. And it was also very difficult for me to get beyond a certain level until Vincent Desiderio came down to the University of Georgia, gave a lecture, and then I realized I didn't know that the Florence Academy existed or the Grand Central Academy existed. Well, at the time it was Water Street in the 90s or early 2000s. I didn't know these institutions existed. I didn't know you could go anywhere to learn these skills at a very high level. I was just kind of working with the rudimentary skills I had, and Vincent Desiderio came and gave this lecture, and he said there's this New York Academy, and I applied for it, and this whole world opened up for me. But just to speak to, like, I think that might be what you were saying, like, in certain places there was a lot of resistance to that. There was, like, in the art world, there was a lot of cultural resistance to what we're doing here. I think a lot of that has changed, at least in my experience.
I think it has changed a great deal. I think it's really opened up, and that there's a tremendous number of people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who are emerging and enthusiastically embracing this subject matter.
And a lot of it is thanks to you.
Right, a lot of
people,
champions
yeah,
who kept this tradition alive over the last 100 years. Yeah. So I think we're going to wrap up. The bar is open for another little while, and we're all going to be around. So please take some time and visit the show. Do any of you have any other last thoughts that I didn't ask or anything?
Thank you, Patricia.
So Brendan Johnston.
Yeah, likewise. This is the most fun for me. I feel
Thank you.